I wish that bullet would have hit him instead of Takeoff, because he was the one that deserved that. Quality control. We ain't never had nobody to attack us, if you know what I mean. You know, when a man attacks a situation with a weapon, then, you know, it become a playing field where, you know, any and everything goes.
Welcome back to BuzzBuster. I'm glad you're here. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss daily videos. J. Prince Sr. appeared to crack under pressure the moment his son, J. Prince Jr., became tied to the fallout surrounding the Takeoff case. For years, he carried the image of someone steady, strategic, and impossible to rattle. Suddenly, that calm seemed to vanish. He looked unsettled, almost as if the situation was slipping beyond his control. What changed everything was one remark he made about that night in Houston.
It wasn't a situation to escalate because it really wasn't there.
Since then, people have been dissecting every word, searching for clues and questioning what may have really happened. That brief statement didn't calm anything down. If anything, it opened the door to even more suspicion and made the entire situation feel far more complicated than it first appeared. That night became a turning point. Takeoff, born Kirshnik Kari Ball, was only 28 years old. He was one part of Migos, the hugely influential rap trio formed with his uncle Quavo and his cousin Offset. Born on June 18, 1994 in Lawrenceville, Georgia, he helped create a group that would eventually reshape the sound of modern hip-hop. Although Migos first came together in 2008, their breakthrough arrived in 2013 when Versace exploded online and pushed them into the spotlight. After that, their rise was impossible to ignore. Bigger hits followed, the attention kept growing, and in 2017 they reached another major milestone when Culture landed at #1 on the Billboard 200. Even though Takeoff was often the quietest member on the surface, people around the industry understood his value. He wasn't the one constantly demanding attention. Instead, he was widely seen as the skilled core of the group. The artist, many believed, helped give Migos its real edge. He was the steady presence behind the music, the unseen glue that made every track land. Just a few weeks later, that momentum was shattered. On October 7th, 2022,
it was really a beautiful night, you know what I'm saying? We all family, we enjoying. Everybody kicking it, you know what I'm saying?
He and Quavo released their collaborative project Only Built for Infinity Links. Less than a month after that, on November 1st, 2022, the night took a devastating turn in downtown Houston. It unfolded outside 810 Billiards and Bowling on San Jacinto Street in the Green Street area. Earlier that evening, a private after-party had been held inside the venue. The gathering was hosted by J. Prince Jr., the son of Rap-A-Lot Records founder J. Prince. Roughly 40 guests were in attendance, with Takeoff and Quavo among them. They were in Houston during a special moment for Jazz Prince, who was being recognized with a surprise honor and an official Jazz Prince Day in the city. Because Quavo was especially close with Jazz Prince, he came out that night to show support and celebrate alongside him. At first, the mood seemed upbeat. Throughout the evening, Quavo shared glimpses of the night on social media while moving through the city, showing excitement, high spirits, and a sense that everything was falling into place. From the outside, it looked like a night built around success, friendship, and celebration. Still, the atmosphere changed with shocking speed. What began as a joyful occasion soon turned to heartbreak. By around 2:30 a.m., the event inside was beginning to wrap up, and guests started making their way out of the venue to a nearby area outside. Up on the third-floor balcony, a dice game drew a crowd and set the scene. What began as a casual gathering shifted fast when the mood suddenly changed.
The thing to me is this clown that came here. I wish he would have never came with Quavo.
Sometime between 2:34 and 2:40 a.m., a heated dispute flared up among several people nearby. Seconds later, multiple shots were heard, and the entire area erupted into confusion. Authorities believe at least 2 different firearms were used, which only added to the chaos as everyone scrambled for safety. Security personnel heard the gunfire, but they did not witness who fired, leaving the most important details uncertain in those first critical moments. Not long after, footage from the scene spread across social media, revealing how devastating the aftermath was. A nurse who lived close to the location reportedly rushed over after hearing the noise, hoping to offer help. Tragically, nothing could be done in time. Takeoff had been struck, and the most painful part is that investigators later said he was not involved in the dice game or the dispute that led up to it. According to police, he was simply an innocent bystander caught in a horrific moment. He was pronounced dead at the scene, and the autopsy later confirmed fatal injuries to the head and torso. The case was officially ruled homicide. 2 others were also hurt during the incident, a 24-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman, though both survived, and their injuries were not considered life-threatening. Quavo was not physically injured, but the emotional weight of what happened was impossible to ignore.
I need to take our mother, you know what I mean? Because I put her at the top of the list because it's an unnatural thing to lose your kid. You know what I mean? I felt all kinds of pain.
He was on the scene as the entire situation came apart in real time. Later that day, Houston Chief Troy Finner made a public statement, making it clear there was no indication Takeoff had been involved in any criminal activity and asking anyone with information to step forward. Meanwhile, the Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission began looking into the venue's liquor license, turning up the pressure even more. According to reports, Quavo had been seen moving away only moments before everything erupted, unharmed himself, but just seconds from learning his nephew was gone.
The gathering had been hosted by J. Prince Jr. Takeoff was the one who lost his life, and before long, attention started moving toward J. Prince Sr. After that, every public comment he made stopped being viewed as simple mourning. Instead, people dissected his words, challenged his tone, and examined every statement from all sides. Eventually, the Prince family appeared on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast to tell their version of what happened that night, and a lot of people were paying close attention. Mike Prince, who said he was present when the situation unfolded, spoke first and tried to paint a picture of how the night began, before everything changed. In his account, the mood had been easygoing at the start. People were relaxed, conversations were flowing, and laughter filled the room. Some were even going back and forth about basketball, the kind of casual debate that made the whole scene seem ordinary. For a while, nothing about the atmosphere suggested that the night would suddenly take such a tragic turn. Nothing about the atmosphere suggested real danger. There was no obvious hostility, no sign that the night was about to spiral out of control. To everyone there, it seemed like an ordinary setting where a casual exchange would stay exactly that. Instead,
to lose your child is a whole different kind of pain. So, I sympathize with that to the fullest because that's what you call unnatural.
The mood changed in an instant. What began as a routine conversation quickly shifted into a dispute, and from there, events moved with alarming speed. J. Prince Sr. later placed responsibility on one person connected to Quavo, saying a disagreement during a basketball-related exchange became physical. In the Prince family's account, that single action turned a minor conflict into something far more serious. Rather than speaking vaguely, J. Prince Sr. made his position clear. He openly pointed to the man he believed was at the center of the incident. Police reports later identified that individual as Willie Bland. From J. Prince Sr.'s point of view, Bland was the key figure who set the entire sequence in motion. What happened next, in his view, was a devastating chain reaction. One choice led to another, and the situation escalated until it ended with Takeoff losing his life outside the bowling alley. After that, the weight of the moment became even more intense. J. Prince Sr. made a statement that immediately shifted the tone, revealing how deeply the tragedy had affected him. His words carried grief, frustration, and anger. None of that emotion was directed inward at his own family. Instead, it was aimed at the person he believed bore responsibility for how the night unfolded. From where J. Prince Sr. stood, everything changed because of that turning point. This was never how the night was meant to unfold. The event had been put together by his son as a moment to bring people together, with roughly 40 guests arriving to enjoy the atmosphere and celebrate. Instead, a sudden burst of chaos transformed that gathering into the center of a major homicide investigation. Almost immediately, the Prince family name was thrust into constant headlines, with attention and pressure coming from every direction. While social media lit up with speculation and endless theories, investigators concentrated on one question above all else: who actually opened fire? Houston police wasted no time getting to work. Officers and detectives began assembling a case by reviewing surveillance footage pulled from cameras across downtown. Clip by clip, angle by angle, they reconstructed the sequence of events, carefully building a timeline of those crucial minutes to understand exactly what took place. From the beginning, detectives moved with urgency to secure the evidence that would define the investigation. One item found at the scene quickly became especially important: a wine bottle left behind in the aftermath. That single piece of evidence turned out to matter far more than anyone first realized. Authorities were able to recover fingerprints from the bottle. On top of that, they also gathered phone records and license plate information connected to a vehicle seen leaving the area at high speed right after the incident. Those details pushed the case forward fast. Then, on November 22, 2022, the first major break became public. A 22-year-old man, Cameron Joshua, known as Lil Cam 5, was arrested and taken into custody. He was then charged in connection with the case. Joshua was charged with unlawfully carrying a weapon after surveillance video and witness statements placed him at the party with a gun, squarely at the center of the investigation. Even so, authorities were clear about one major point: they did not believe he was the person who fired the shots that killed Takeoff. His lawyer echoed that position, insisting Joshua never shot anyone and pushing back strongly against the growing public speculation. Everything shifted days later with an arrest that sent the case into an even bigger spotlight. On December 1st, 2022,
He don't make that move, then the night is everybody's still here and live to see another day, and you know what I mean? It's bubbly and lovey-dovey. Nothing changed where my love is concerned, where Quavo is concerned. So, there's love here, and
33-year-old Patrick Xavier Clark was taken into custody and charged with murder, a development that immediately drew national attention. Police stopped him during a traffic stop on Houston's east side, and prosecutors quickly argued that he posed a major flight risk. What investigators uncovered only deepened the scrutiny. Reports said Clark had applied for an expedited passport and was planning a trip to Mexico. At the time he was stopped, he was allegedly carrying a large amount of cash. Taken together, those details prompted serious concern from authorities. Court documents added another striking layer. According to those records, surveillance footage appeared to see Clark firing toward a crowd while holding the same wine bottle in his other hand. That bottle, which was left at the scene, became a crucial piece of evidence. Investigators linked it to the case through fingerprints, vehicle data, and additional forensic material, tightening the focus around the prosecution's theory and giving the public a clearer look at why this arrest changed everything.
Investigators said there was additional forensic evidence connecting him to what happened that night. Even with all the confusion, law enforcement never changed its position on one key point: Takeoff was not the person they believed was being targeted. According to police, he was not involved in the dispute and had no role in the confrontation that spiraled out of control. At first, Clark's bond was set at $2 million. Later, on January 5, 2020, he secured his release by posting $1 million. Freedom came with major restrictions. Authorities required him to give up his passport and remain on a Jeep's ankle monitor, allowing them to track his movements closely. Meanwhile, Clark's attorneys continued to push the same message from the start. They maintained that he was not guilty. Some coverage also raised the possibility of self-defense, hinting that the events of that night may have been far more complicated than they initially appeared. Months later, on May 25, 2023, a Harris County grand jury formally indicted Clark on a murder charge. If convicted, he could face a sentence ranging from 25 years to life in prison. Yet, despite the seriousness of the case, the legal process dragged on. Court proceedings moved at a slow pace, and one delay led to another, including a hearing that was ultimately postponed. From December 2025 into January 2026, the case seemed stuck in place. Each development drew attention, but none brought a real sense of resolution. By February 2026, the long-running legal battle was still hanging in the balance, with no clear ending in sight. No agreement had been finalized, and the case was still moving toward a courtroom showdown. Jury selection was locked in for November 5, 2026, with opening proceedings expected to follow on November 9th. Up to that point, nothing had been settled.
I look forward to that coming back together soon. Don't ever put me in no position where, I have to defend myself. You know what I mean? That wouldn't be healthy for you. And, I have to say that. I hate
they took 3 seconds.
And major questions continued to surround the case. As the legal process unfolded, Takeoff's loved ones and supporters gathered to honor his memory. A private service was held in Atlanta on November 10, 2022. Soon after, State Farm Arena hosted a huge public celebration of life that drew an emotional crowd. By the following day, several major figures had come to pay their respects, including Offset, Quavo, Cardi B, and Drake. The atmosphere was heavy, heartfelt, and filled with tributes to the impact he left behind. Later, he was buried at Peachtree Memorial Park in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. His death deeply affected the music industry and fueled broader discussion around gun violence, particularly in hip-hop. In the aftermath, Quavo became more active in advocacy, using that loss to push for greater awareness. Just when the story already seemed complicated, another development surfaced. During 2024, a former forensic analyst connected to Harris County cases faced scrutiny over the way evidence had been processed. That review led to Brady notices being issued in hundreds of cases. Although the exact impact on Clark's trial remained dependent on future court rulings, the situation added yet another layer of uncertainty to an already closely watched case. The situation was already tangled, and this only made it harder to understand. During an appearance on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast, J. Prince Sr. spoke with absolute conviction. He didn't hedge his opinion or soften his stance. In his view, the root of the entire conflict traced back to Willie Bland, a member of Quavo's circle. From there, he zeroed in on the police report tied to Bland, insisting it contained claims he believed were inaccurate. Rather than speaking in broad terms, J. Prince Sr. carefully walked through the document line by line. He even quoted portions of Bland's own interview, using those statements to challenge the story being told. His point came through unmistakably. If a person knowingly moved towards armed men and still decided to make things physical, he argued, the outcome should not be seen as some shocking accident. To him, that kind of choice creates consequences. In the middle of that escalation, the life that was lost was Takeoff's. He didn't stop there. Another major point he highlighted involved Bland's claim that he received a firearm from Jazz Prince, taken from a truck so Quavo's group would have protection while in Houston. That part of the story opened the door to even more scrutiny, and the Prince family pressed the issue. Their reasoning was direct and difficult to ignore. If security or protection was supposedly being provided, how could the same group later end up in a confrontation that spiraled out of control? From their perspective, those two ideas clashed. The explanation, as they saw it, simply didn't make sense, and that contradiction became one of the biggest questions hanging over the entire case. Once the police account was read aloud, it shaped a very specific version of events. In that version, Willie Bland appeared to be the person who triggered the shift, turning what had been a quiet night into a rapidly escalating situation. Not long after, J. Prince Sr. made a comparison that caught people's attention. He framed it like a bank robbery. When two people set a crime in motion and someone uninvolved is harmed as a result, the blame leads back to the ones who started it. From his standpoint, the same principle applied here. That comparison became the foundation of how he explained the tragedy. To J. Prince Sr., the focus was never only on who fired a weapon. His argument centered on the individual he believed sparked the sequence of events in the first place.
In his view, that first move mattered most because everything that followed grew out of it. Soon, that interpretation became a major part of the public conversation around who should be held responsible for Takeoff's death. Yet online, another story was gaining traction. Rather than directing blame at Willie Bland, many people began looking towards the Prince family. Before long, social media was flooded with rumors, theories, and non-stop speculation. Each new post seemed to add more noise, and the pressure only intensified as the days passed. What started as questions quickly turned into a wave of suspicion that kept building.
Then, November 3rd, 2022 arrived. Only 2 days later, the tension surrounding the case had already reached another level. In the aftermath of the shooting,
of a situation where I was caught on video and turned it into what they wanted it.
He said that in reality,
In that 3-second clip, it was me and Mike walking to the restroom so he can wash the blood off his hands and so he can enlighten me.
J. Prince Sr. chose to speak out for the first time. He did it through a lengthy Instagram statement posted with a photo of Takeoff, and the message landed hard. There was obvious sorrow in his words, but also a sense of urgency, almost as if he understood that public attention was about to close in fast. He opened by offering sympathy to Takeoff's loved ones, speaking directly to his family, friends, and everyone feeling the loss. In his tribute, he described Takeoff as a brother, a son, a role model, and a man of faith. He said the pain was devastating and pointed to the wave of love surrounding Takeoff as proof that this loss was being felt far beyond one circle. Soon, however, the mood of the post changed. The statement became firmer and far more direct. J. Prince Sr. drew a clear line, stressing that he had no patience for reckless behavior and turning his attention toward whoever was responsible. He said the person who fired the shot would find no shelter with him, no protection near him, and no place to stand beside him. What made the post even more striking was that he emphasized this position before knowing whose bullet had caused the tragedy. He kept returning to the source of the situation, repeatedly framing it as senseless and insisting that whoever set it in motion needed to answer for it. That point seemed intentional. He wanted the focus not only on the outcome, but on what led to it in the first place. He also spoke about the videos circulating online, signaling that he was fully aware of how quickly the story was spreading. He didn't soften his response. In plain terms, he said the incident never should have been filmed, and it absolutely should not have been spread online for relatives, close friends, and supporters to witness. That message landed with extra weight because those videos were circulating at incredible speed. J. Prince Sr. also made a point of reminding everyone that his family had long-standing ties with Takeoff, Quavo, and Offset. Over the years, he said, that relationship had been built on genuine respect and a real bond. There was no tension behind the scenes, no secret conflict, only shared history and mutual regard. More than a simple social media statement, that Instagram post carried several layers at once. It honored a life, drew a firm line, and reflected the kind of grief that comes with protecting what matters. For anyone paying attention, it served as a clear signal. Still, the most emotional moment came later. Months after that post, J. Prince Sr. appeared on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast alongside his son and Mike Prince. This time, nothing felt polished or staged. The atmosphere was heavy, immediate, and deeply personal. When he began speaking about Takeoff's mother, everything changed. The tone shifted instantly from a public conversation about loss to something far more intimate and painful. You could hear it before he even finished the thought. He stopped for a moment, and that pause carried its own meaning. Once he continued,
He spoke about the kind of pain that comes with losing a child. He made it clear that this kind of loss lives in a different place, one that words can barely reach. Nothing, he said, could be measured against this kind of grief. Over the years, he had already endured the deaths of relatives and close friends, yet this struck him as something entirely separate. A loss like this didn't fit alongside anything else. What came through wasn't performance or concern for appearances. It sounded like a father imagining another father's nightmare and struggling to make peace with something that simply defies reason. Every word carried that burden. You could sense the harsh truth underneath it all. A parent was now facing life without a son, and to him, that reality felt deeply wrong. He had known sorrow before. Parents were gone. Siblings, cousins, and longtime friends had been lost too. Even with all of that behind him, this pain stood apart in a way he said he could barely put into words. One idea kept returning again and again. He called it unnatural. He repeated that description because no other term seemed strong enough to express what he meant. Adding to the emotional weight was another painful detail that never seemed far from his mind. His own son had hosted the event connected to everything that unfolded. Even during the moments when he didn't say it outright, that fact seemed to hang over every sentence. It showed up in the pauses, in the tone, in the heaviness behind what he was trying to explain. J. Prince Sr. left no doubt about the impact. From that point forward, he believed life would never carry the same feeling again. Something had shifted permanently, and he made it clear there was no returning to how things once were. Before everything unraveled, J. Prince Sr. described the night in a way that sounded nothing like the disorder people later focused on. From his point of view, the atmosphere was steady, peaceful, and headed toward a simple ending where everyone walked away without trouble. He insisted there was no brewing conflict, no visible friction, and no secret dispute between Migos and the Prince family.
Instead, he framed the entire tragedy as the result of a single choice made in an instant, not part of any larger scheme. To him, there was no setup and no hidden agenda waiting in the background. That conviction became central to how he defended himself, but it also carried serious weight. Regardless of how he told the story, one fact remained impossible to escape. A life was lost, and nothing he said could reverse that. As the interview continued, he also responded to speculation about his family's connection with Quavo.
No knowledge of him. I ain't know he was from Chicago. I ain't know he was a jeweler until social media started trying to point a finger because he was standing next to me, and it's just unfortunate.
J. Prince Sr. rejected the claim that the relationship had been shattered, maintaining that the bond still existed and had not been destroyed. He went even further, saying there would eventually be a moment when Quavo could speak publicly and back up what truly happened that night. His position was clear. The Prince family, he said, never abandoned Quavo, never showed disrespect toward Takeoff, and remained with Quavo for hours after the incident. Even so, that explanation did not erase the questions surrounding the situation. It didn't silence the doubts, and it didn't automatically restore public trust. The gap between his account and what many people believed was still there, hanging over everything like a shadow. His sympathy did not seem to reach every person equally. The instant Offset's name entered the conversation, everything changed. The mood tightened, the message became sharper. J. Prince Sr. openly criticized him, suggesting he was making public statements while not showing the same level of closeness to Takeoff when Takeoff was still here. It landed like a direct warning, not a passing comment. Viewers could feel the tension immediately. This was not a loose emotional outburst. Every word appeared measured, intentional, and aimed at someone carrying grief as well. That exchange revealed something important about how J. Prince Sr. was thinking in that moment. He was mourning, yes, yet he was also fiercely protecting his family's reputation. The same force that helped shape his image over the years was now being turned toward defense, especially as pressure and scrutiny kept building around his name. Meanwhile, even as he tried to push back and clarify the narrative, the internet had already taken off in another direction. Online speculation was spreading fast, and with each new post, J. Prince Jr. was pulled further into public attention. Much of that spotlight went well beyond anything authorities had actually verified. Almost immediately after Takeoff's passing, theories began circulating. A widely shared video only intensified the attention. Platforms like YouTube, Reddit, and hip-hop forums quickly filled with people piecing together their own explanations, often treating guesses like solid facts. What started as online reaction soon grew into something much bigger, creating a storm of suspicion that moved faster than any official update and made an already painful situation even more complicated. What looked at first like a terrible accident after a dice game suddenly started to feel, to many people, far more deliberate. At the center of that growing storm was J. Prince Jr. As the host of the event and a figure long connected to influence in Houston's rap world, he quickly became the focus of intense public scrutiny. Everything intensified once a video surfaced online. In those brief seconds, J. Prince Jr. could be seen walking past Takeoff in the chaotic aftermath. That single clip changed the entire conversation. Viewers replayed it endlessly, slowed it down, and picked apart every step, every glance, every second. Before long, people were calling his behavior detached, unsettling, even suspicious. The visual impression hit hard, and once that interpretation started spreading, stopping it became almost impossible. A moment lasting only seconds was cut, reposted, and circulated millions of times, with many treating it as evidence that something larger was being hidden. Meanwhile, the surrounding context was drowned out by online reactions. Social media had already settled on its version of events, and the effect on the Prince family's reputation was immediate. Public opinion moved fast, and it moved harshly. Eventually, J. Prince Jr. responded during an appearance on the $1 Million Worth of Game podcast. There, he challenged the way people had interpreted the footage. According to him, the clip that spread across the internet captured only a fragment of what actually happened and left out the full picture. He insisted the viral story missed what really happened. In his account, he was inside, taking care of a bill when everything unfolded. By the time he appeared in that footage, he said, he was simply walking with Mike Prince toward the restroom so Mike could clean blood from his hands. Those brief moments, he argued, showed almost nothing of the bigger picture. Earlier in the day, he and Mike had spent plenty of time around Takeoff, moving together like close family rather than distant acquaintances. What was meant to be a night of unity and positive energy turned into something heartbreaking instead. Online, however, the damage had already been done. Once the clip started circulating, it quickly grew beyond the original moment. Viewers replayed it, argued over it, and built entire theories around a few seconds of video, often treating those fragments like the complete truth. J. Prince Sr. eventually addressed the controversy as well. He said the way his son was being portrayed was one of the biggest falsehoods being spread. From the family's perspective, the full timeline painted a very different picture, one that clashed with the version gaining traction across the internet. Yet, that is how viral moments work. Public opinion can move faster than verified facts, and once a narrative takes hold, it becomes incredibly difficult to undo. As a result, that single piece of footage kept J. Prince Jr.'s name connected to the situation, even though no official report had confirmed the claims people were making. People close to the situation highlighted details the viral clip never showed. They said J. Prince Jr. had reached behind Takeoff's head in an effort to help, remained beside him, and was left so distressed afterward that he had to clean blood off himself. Those moments existed, yet they never traveled online with the same force as the short, dramatic footage everyone kept reposting.
That's when the story really began to spin out of control. Once the video took over social media, speculation exploded. Rumors quickly turned into elaborate theories, and the claims became more extreme by the day. One of the loudest accusations suggested J. Prince Jr. had ties to so-called loaded dice games, described online as high-stakes situations where rappers and other well-known figures were brought in under false pretenses. According to those allegations, the games were supposedly manipulated from the start, with weighted dice, controlled outcomes, and the possibility of theft or something even more serious. None of that was proven, but the idea spread fast.
Internet personalities, including people like Wack100, added fuel to it by linking Takeoff's death to separate events, such as the killing of Duke the Jeweler, in an attempt to suggest a broader pattern. Soon, the conversation grew beyond that single night. People began digging into the Prince family's business relationships and revisiting past controversies, using those pieces to build a much larger narrative. Even comments made by J. Prince Sr. were pulled into the discussion and reinterpreted through that lens. What started as a limited video clip turned into a sweeping online theory, driven less by verified facts and more by how quickly suspicion can spread. Everything escalated after he said Willie Bland had been dishonest in police paperwork. To a lot of people online, that didn't look like protection of his family at all. Instead, they saw it as an attempt to shift responsibility somewhere else. Soon, the conversation got messier. Speculation about friction between Migos and the Rap-A-Lot camp started spreading fast, with some tying the situation to supposed long-running tensions between Atlanta and Houston. Before long, the internet took it to another level. In some spaces, people began pushing wild claims that the entire situation had been staged, turning a real tragedy into something that sounded more like a conspiracy than reality.
There's gonna come a day, there's gonna come a time that everything we saying, Quavo gonna have the opportunity.
Stop slipping, man. Take advantage of these blessings you got and take care of you and yours, man. And I just want to say, once again, condolence to...
When J. Prince Jr. appeared on the podcast, he confronted part of that speculation directly. One comparison in particular involved Duke the Jeweler, and he rejected it outright. His position was simple. Before that night, he says he had never known Duke the Jeweler personally, so in his view, there was no genuine link there. Despite all the rumors, the Prince family never changed their version of events. From their perspective, it was an ordinary gathering with no unusual setup and no plan behind what happened. They maintained that the incident came down to the actions of a single individual, not a larger plot or coordinated scheme. They also disputed the claim that they vanished once everything happened. On the podcast, Mike Prince said he remained with Quavo for hours afterward, around 2-3, focused on making sure he was okay. That detail was presented as a direct response to the idea that the family simply walked away in the aftermath. Before they left, one important point stood out. They did not simply disappear after everything unfolded. They remained there, right in the middle of the chaos. Even so, once online rumors started gaining momentum, they spread fast. With each fresh accusation, it became tougher for people to tell what was verified and what was just assumption. J. Prince Jr. also explained that that night he was focused on making sure Quavo was able to leave safely and get where he needed to be. At the same time, J. Prince Sr. pushed back hard on another claim circulating online: the idea that the Prince family controls Houston, like artists have to check in with them just to move through the city. He flatly rejected that narrative, describing it as weak gossip and insisting that was never their way of doing things. Instead, he pointed to their long track record. For more than 30 decades, he said, they had welcomed artists, built genuine connections, and treated people with respect. From his perspective, nothing even remotely similar to what happened to Takeoff had ever taken place around them before. That became the message they repeated again and again. No matter the interview, the position stayed the same. They insisted the incident was not something they set in motion, approved of, or helped create. In their telling, it was a tragedy that affected them as well as Takeoff, all because one individual made a reckless choice. Offline, people often judge a situation by what happened right in front of them. Across the internet, though, a very different standard takes over. Simply being close to an event can be enough for strangers to attach blame, and any link, especially through attorneys, starts to look far more suspicious than it might in real life. That's exactly when this story shifted again. Roughly 8 months before the trial, in March 2026, Patrick Xavier Clark made a legal decision that quickly grabbed attention far beyond the courtroom. Records filed around March 20th, 2026 showed that Clark replaced his previous attorneys and hired 3 prominent Houston defense lawyers: Kent Schaffer, Anthony Osso, and Dan Cogdell. Under normal circumstances, a defendant changing legal teams ahead of a major case would barely register as shocking. What changed everything here was who those lawyers were. Kent Schaffer had previously represented J. Prince Sr. in other high-profile matters. Anthony Asso was also connected to that same legal network. Dan Cogdill, meanwhile, was widely known as a seasoned Texas defense attorney with ties to major names in the region. Once those details surfaced, a move that might have seemed routine on paper suddenly became a major online flashpoint. Hip-hop media locked in. Comment sections exploded. Social platforms filled with speculation almost immediately.
One question kept rising above all the noise. Why would the person accused in Takeoff's death, tied to an incident at an event hosted by J. Prince Jr., end up represented by attorneys connected to the same broader circle? From there, public conversation only intensified, and the legal switch stopped looking simple in the eyes of the internet. The real uproar began with one detail: the legal team. As soon as people noticed that Patrick Xavier Clark was being defended by attorneys tied to J. Prince Sr., the conversation exploded. There were no simple explanations, and once that information spread online, the case took on an even heavier cloud of suspicion. A situation already under a harsh public spotlight suddenly became even more tense. Across X and Instagram, reactions poured in almost instantly. Post after post treated the attorney connection as more than a coincidence, with many viewers suggesting it pointed to something far bigger behind the scenes. What made it especially uncomfortable for the public was the family association. The same name linked to the gathering where Takeoff lost his life was now also appearing, through reported legal connections, around the defense of the man accused in the case. Hip-hop blogs and media outlets moved quickly, and before long, one question was everywhere. What is the real link between Patrick Xavier Clark and the Prince family? For people already skeptical of the official story, this didn't look like a minor footnote. To them, it seemed like validation of long-running theories they had been repeating for years. In that reading of the situation, any connection between Clark and that circle made the attorney ties appear strategic rather than accidental. Some believed it could be a way to shape public perception and keep the spotlight away from the event's host. Under that theory, Clark was not simply defending himself against serious charges. He was being viewed by some as someone receiving protection. That interpretation is what pushed the controversy to another level and kept the internet locked on every new development. People on the internet ran with their own conclusions, and the speculation spread almost instantly. Still, the concern didn't begin or end online. Even away from social platforms, this development created real legal questions. One issue stood out right away. Attorneys with previous connections to the Prince family joining the case naturally raised concerns about possible conflicts. That becomes especially sensitive if the defense plans to challenge testimony about what took place that night. Consider how many details could surface in court. Questions about security, guest access, and overall event oversight may all become part of the discussion. Those subjects are closely tied to the hosting side of the night, which only adds another layer of complexity. Timing made the situation feel even more striking.
Quality control.
We ain't never had nobody to attack us, if you know what I mean. You know, when a man attack a situation with a weapon, then, you know, it become a playing field where, you know, any and everything goes.
The change in legal representation happened at a critical moment, just as pretrial motions and discovery disputes were intensifying before the November 2026 trial. At the same time, prosecutors were continuing to strengthen their case through surveillance video, ballistics analysis, phone records, and witness accounts. Against that backdrop, Clark's defense team brought in lawyers who already had familiarity with the Prince family's legal background and long-standing connections. In a case already under heavy scrutiny, that kind of inside understanding seemed to offer more than what people would expect from a standard defense setup. Naturally, that led to even more public attention and even more questions. Throughout all of it,
J. Prince Sr. has remained consistent. Since November 2022, he has continued to hold the very same position. J. Prince Sr. has remained firm from the start. His family, he says, had nothing to do with what happened. According to him, the events were set in motion by someone outside their circle, and he insisted they cared about Takeoff as if he were one of their own. That position did not soften over time. In a January 2025 recap, he repeated the same message and rejected the version of events spreading online. He referenced the full sequence of that day, the time they spent together, the efforts made to help, and even the painful aftermath, including having to wash away blood as evidence that they were present and involved, not distant or uncaring. But now, a new legal development is placing that defense under even harsher public focus. From the outside looking in, many people are finding it difficult to separate a strictly professional attorney-client relationship from something that feels far more personal. That distinction has become the center of growing suspicion. For years, J. Prince Sr. has publicly argued that his family played no part in the tragedy. Yet, he is now confronting intense scrutiny because the person accused is being defended by lawyers connected to him. Whether that connection is nothing more than business or whether it suggests a deeper bond is no longer being treated as just another internet argument. At this point, the issue may be decided in a courtroom rather than on social media. As a result, every comment J. Prince Sr. has made since the beginning now carries heavier meaning than before. Caught between visible grief and rising public doubt over a young life lost far too soon, everything points to one clear goal: keeping the Prince name respected and firmly intact.
During the podcast, J. Prince Sr. closed with the voice of a man convinced that the real story will eventually surface, while also understanding that most people have already made up their minds. Public opinion, in many ways, is already locked in. Yet with Patrick Xavier Clark's trial scheduled for November 2026, this is no longer being viewed as just another legal proceeding. The attention around it has grown into something far larger. What began as a case is now becoming a major public reckoning, centered on the questions people have been asking from the very beginning. Was this only a heartbreaking situation that spiraled out of control at a party? Or are there still pieces of the story hidden beneath everything the public has already heard? Instead of fading with time, those doubts have only intensified. By the end of the podcast, J. Prince Sr. widened the message beyond this single courtroom battle. His focus shifted to the hip-hop world as a whole. He urged the culture to safeguard what it has worked so hard to build, to think more carefully, and to stay away from the kinds of split-second situations that can alter lives forever. For him, this was never only about one night in Houston. It stood for a much bigger warning. Success can attract the wrong energy. And once people in that orbit stop moving with caution, everything can unravel faster than anyone expects. That seemed to be the heart of his closing message. Protect the legacy, move wisely, and don't let one moment destroy what took years to create. Take a step back and look at what really happened. A single reckless choice was allowed to spiral into consequences no one can undo. Whether the Prince family bears any blame beyond simply hosting the gathering is now a matter for the courts to sort out. Still, this story reaches far beyond any legal ruling. At its core, it's about grief, public image, and the painful struggle to understand a tragedy that may have been avoidable. A final decision could be months away, yet the doubts, scrutiny, and unanswered questions are only growing louder.